going to notify Twitter that we're doing this. About the lack of notice. It says we have no viewers. I don't know if I should be talking to the void or not, being that lives are just not the thing I do all the time. But we're going to let Twitter know, or X, whatever we're calling it these days, that I'm doing it. And then we're going to go over here and we're going to try and find our live stream. Oh, there's 23 of you in here. Wow. Get this opened up. Oh, there's 20. Let's see. J Security, glad to be here. Oh, I'm glad that you're glad to be here, and I'm glad that you're here. The Stormcrow, he's here too. Excellent. Hey, Troy. Good to see you in here, man. Friend of mine from back in Ontario. Watch your eyes here, Frank. Ron Ulan, Manitoba, here listening. Apparently they just revoked Ezra's press pass. That didn't take long. I don't mean to laugh, but I can't say I'm surprised. Rebel News just doesn't have the luck. So let's get this thing up, and we'll shrink me down. And then I guess we'll just wait the 35 seconds until it goes live, and hopefully you guys can hear it through the channel. So I didn't plan to do this, but I was about to sit down to dinner, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go and do a live while this is going on, because I'm going to be watching it anyway. Now I just got to find you guys again. What did I do with you all? Hi, Frank. Watching your channel. That's good. I'm glad you're watching and not just typing to me. It's good to watch and type at the same time. Edmonton, Alberta. Baby. That's awesome. Just gave myself a like. The only time I will like my own stuff is when I make a video. I will always like it just for the algorithm, because you get to do that once. Type in the chat, people, because maybe it's broken. Is it broken? Rebel News had the best questions at the scrum. Of course they did. They had a lot of good questions. And also, as I talked about today in my video, Alex Zoltan, that question, getting Mark Carney to commit that there's only two sexes and commit to women's only spaces, even if he clearly did it accidentally, was definitely worth the worth tuning in just to see that. Live in 18 minutes. So what, we're delayed again? Is that what's happening? Anybody got word on why it's delayed? Let's see. Probably just Ezra. It's pandemonium in the media center as a Hill Times reporter has a wild temper tantrum at the independent media. Oh, they don't like the presence of alternative media voices at the event. That's not really shocking at all. Oh, so I guess we're just going to chat. 59 of you watching now, apparently. Watching from Southern Ontario. How's the weather down there? Hey, Frank, I'm happy you are live, says Phil Archambault. I'm happy to be here, too. They ask the odd questions. They ask the real questions if you're talking about the alternative media. They actually ask about what people might be interested in that is not otherwise vetted for mainstream consumption. Yo, do you think Manitoba will be a part of 51st State? Why or why not? I don't think so at all. I mean, if you watch my video today, WAB just seized, or is, I don't know if he's seized it already or he's talking about seized. I'm pretty sure he seized it already. A whole tract of land that was in private hands, development permits issued, work began, and on a whim, he just decided he was going to expropriate the entire project and turn it into a provincial park without consulting with the landowners, because you don't own land in Canada. You might have the title to it, but you don't have property rights enshrined in the charter, so you don't really own anything. You don't own any property. You don't really own your house. You would think that there'd be just compensation, but when a guy like Wab Kinew, Premier of Manitoba, can just come along and expropriate a bunch of property without even calling the owner, without issuing a legal notice, nothing. They found out about it at the same time everybody else did, when he dropped a bombshell in the middle of a, I can't remember if it's Manitoba Hydro, is that what they call it in Manitoba? The Manitoba Electrical Utility Company, whatever it is. He was doing an announcement. He just dropped that bombshell on everybody that he was seizing all this property. So no, I don't think Manitoba is going to be involved, at least not right away. Beautiful here in Niagara Falls today, brother. That's good. Do you believe that 6 little seats could go Liberal in Alberta? No, I don't. I don't believe it at all. I don't. I've seen polls come out that show the Liberals ahead of the Conservatives in Alberta, and I don't believe it at all. It's not. It defies credibility. There's no way whatsoever that that's even close to true. Okay, well, if the debate has started, what is going on with Canada Free Press here?
I think we've seen, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in, and thanks for the question, Steve.
How are the volume levels?
We've seen what, for a lot of people, feels like a betrayal when we look at the United States. I grew up in a border town, I grew up in Windsor, and we saw how connected we were as a city and as a community. People lived on one side of the border, worked on the other, people traveled back and forth all the time. We're in the automotive capital of Canada, and we knew how important it was to be able to build cars in Canada, but we saw that those cars went back and forth across the border. Seeing what Donald Trump did to attack Canada in this unprovoked way without any justification really felt like a betrayal. And so Canadians now are right to say, well, we don't really trust Donald Trump at this point, and we can't really have a lot of faith in him. So when it comes to our Arctic sovereignty and our security, we need to make decisions that are in our best interest and no longer be so dependent and so reliant on the U.S. And that's what I would advocate for, making sure we are resilient, independent, and less dependent on the United States.
Mr. Blanchet, for you, what supports would you want to see for industries affected by tariffs, many, of course, of which are in Quebec?
Many of them. First, be all welcome in Quebec and Montreal. You have me because I try not to speak English in Montreal. However, I think we should never underestimate the threat that Mr. Trump poses on Quebec economy and Canada economy and Mexico economy. But we must acknowledge the fact that the economy of Quebec is built differently. The challenges are not the same. The necessity for Quebec to have at least partly its own voice in the negotiation is important. The difference between Quebec and Canada is very important in terms of economy, but also in terms of identity and language and values and who we are and the way we want to handle immigration. So we have the right to be different, and if this difference is being respected by whoever becomes Prime Minister of Canada, we will be reliable partners in order to achieve the best possible negotiation and protect ourselves and our economies as partners.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. Okay, we now move into open debate, and I'll start it off, Mr. Carney, with you, and then...
Not really sure how to handle this, but the fact that they both repeated this notion that there's no justification for the Trump tariffs just shows how dishonest they are. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you understand that I've put paid to the very things that he's talking about. Reciprocal tariffs are one set of tariffs, and retaliatory tariffs or punitive tariffs are another set of tariffs. There's two sets. One is for the money laundering and smuggling problem and drug problem that Canada has, and the other set is just to match the tariffs that we charge them. But they repeat this lie because they know a certain part of the Canadian public, most of the Canadian public, hate Donald Trump. And so they just lie to you. They don't even bother to tell you a nuanced truth.
We go from there. Do you still support dollar-for-dollar tariffs, even if they ultimately threaten Canadian jobs and businesses?
No, and in fact, we've already moved off from dollar-for-dollar tariffs. We have to recognize, and I think we all do, the United States economy is more than 10 times the size of the Canadian economy. And the principle in terms of our counter tariffs is to have maximum impact in the United States, as I said a moment ago, minimum impact here. So we have to think about the impact on Canadian businesses. I'll give you one example, if I may. In the auto sector, the way we've designed those auto tariffs is that Canadian automakers, if they maintain production here, if they maintain their investments here, when I say Canadian automakers, I mean automakers that have jobs and plants and production in Canada, then they can have lower tariffs on what they ship to the United States. We create a huge incentive for them in order to do that. We also have carved out the Canadian auto parts sector. Last point, I know you're pressed for time, the Canadian auto parts sector, so that it can remain competitive with the United States. We're focused on maximizing Canadian jobs, maximizing the harm in the U.S. So that we get them where we need them.
Mr. Poilievre, you want in, then Mr. Singh.
The fact is that when the government levies tariffs against the United States, it's Canadians who pay. So right out the gate, it's just a bunch of talking points. It's just a bunch of lies.
Mr. Carney, you claim that you want our country to respond with strength, but after the last decade, half of which time you've been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, our economy is weaker than ever before. It's been the worst growth in the G7. We've lost $500 billion of investment south of the border. You supported blocking pipelines in Canada that gave Donald Trump and the U.S. a near monopoly over our energy. And now you want to keep in place Bill C-69, the liberal no new development law that blocks us from shipping our resources overseas. How could you possibly think it's a good idea to give the Americans a continued monopoly on our energy projects when you have seen how much these liberal policies have weakened our country over the last decade?
That's a solid answer. He doesn't target Trump. He doesn't dump on Trump or dunk on him. He targets Carney directly. I like that.
Mr. Carney, respond, and then Mr. Singh.
Sure.
If I may, yes. So let's go to my record. My record is a month long as Prime Minister. And this goes to the heart of coming to the Americans with strength, but doing the right thing for Canada. Within the first week as Prime Minister, I sat down with all the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as the leaders of the Indigenous peoples. Got an agreement with all the provinces and territories, doesn't happen very often, got an agreement for them to have one Canadian economy instead of 13, first point. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Thirdly, the federal government to commit with respect to project reviews.
The question was about
Sorry,
pipelines.
I'm getting to it. Thirdly, one project, one review, and relying
That's not
on
possible
provincial.
under
Yes, it is
C-69.
possible under. It is possible on our system.
No,
it
it's
is
not.
the
It's
impact
banned
assessment.
under C-69.
It is agreed on under the impact assessment framework, and we have a cooperation agreement with British Columbia already. We're looking forward to them with the other provinces. We will move forward.
no.
directly.
Got to let
jump in on
okay,
this.
Mr. Singh's turn, please.
Anti-development
Of
law.
course, we agree around having a strategic response to the United States. But what I'm concerned about is what we're doing here in Canada. We are already seeing threats to our country in that just the threats alone of the tariffs have meant Canadians have lost their jobs. The threats of the tariffs that are in place right now, the impact of those tariffs is that we've lost jobs in steel, aluminum, and the auto sector. People are already losing their...
We're losing jobs because of the high tax socialist regime that these people have instituted. Poilievre is right about C-69. It bans pipelines. Carney has already said that he's not interested in building new pipelines. Now, he might say something different tonight, but that doesn't change anything. He says one thing one day, he says something else, and he wrote a book full of declarations of allegiance only to net zero. It has nothing to do with Canada, and he talks about his record being only a month old. This guy's been around shaping global politics for well over a decade. He's as globalist an insider as you get. He ran 2 central banks. His record's only 1 month old.
their jobs. And while, Mr. Carney, you had time, as you mentioned, not very long time, but as Prime Minister, you showed us your priorities. The first thing you did is you had traveled, you made a tax cut for millionaires, which was reversing on the capital gains. So you gave a tax cut to millionaires, but you didn't have time to increase the amount that workers get on EI. Right now, workers who are struggling and wondering, what am I going to do if I lose my job? Workers who've lost their job are saying, how do I pay my bills when EI only covers half of a worker's salary? Maybe 40 years ago that would have worked, but right now most workers are spending their entire salary just to pay the bills, to pay their mortgage and their rent, and to put food on the table. So EI is not good enough, and it shows Canadians that you didn't make it a priority to protect those that are impacted by these tariffs, that are threatened because their jobs are lost.
We have not heard from Monsieur Blanchet yet in this segment, so please.
Yeah, Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English. You said in British Columbia in February that you would force oil and gas through pipelines through Quebec, either we wanted it or not. You would use emergency powers in order to do so. And 2 days later in Montreal, you said that you would never do that without the approval of Quebec. What's the point of using emergency powers if you do have the agreement of Quebec? However, I do agree with you. It's important to be very strong in front of Mr. Trump. However, I would keep the dollar for dollar policy. Don't be weak in front of Mr. Trump. And those counter tariffs have to be targeted. You have put out already $2 billion for Ontario auto industry, car industry, and the lumberwood industry in Quebec has already.
I don't even know why we're listening to this guy. I understand why he's there because his party technically complies with the rules, but this is Quebec. He represents Quebec. They should just get on with separating. He has no intention of forming a government, so what is he doing at a federal leadership debate? I understand he obeys the rules, but the man's stated purpose is breaking the country up. So why are we even listening? It bothers me.
Paid to United States $2 billion, and you have not raised one finger in order to help us.
Let's get from Mr. Poilievre and then a response.
In order to bail out us, in order to bail out Quebec, who opposes every single thing that would strengthen this federation with all of its problems, uniting the country and stitching it together with more than one road and one railroad. He wants more. He gets enough through equalization. The whole country is bent over a barrel. Because of official bilingualism, we have to have a French leaders debate, even though they have no intention of forming a government. But in Quebec, they don't have any English debates during the provincial elections. They have sign cops. They've got language cops. The whole country is forced to stomach Quebec. And we got to listen to this guy talk about how we need to do more.
Response from Mr. Carney.
Well, Mr. Carney refused to answer the question about pipelines. Just the other day, he said that he doesn't necessarily think we need to build pipelines. Let me tell you what that means. Right now, the Americans get 97% of our oil, 100% of our natural gas exports at big discounts. We have to send Canadian oil from Western Canada through the States just to get it back to Quebec because we don't have a pipeline. And now there's this law, Liberal Law C-69, which effectively bans pipelines. The 14 biggest energy and resource companies say it has to go if we're ever going to build another project. And I asked Mr. Carney why he would keep in place this anti-pipeline law that effectively empowers Donald Trump to have a total monopoly on our single biggest export. Why would you not repeal this Liberal law? Isn't it because you are exactly in the same line as Justin Trudeau and the rest of the Liberal team that is now making up your cabinet?
There's a lot of reasons why the Americans get our oil at a discount. One of the main reasons is the oil that we produce is heavy. We have to buy oil from them to mix with our oil just to make it move through the pipelines. Now, I don't really expect Pierre to get into that in a debate where he's trying to win an election against Carney, but it's a point that I think is valid.
Let's get a response.
Well, let me pick up a couple of points that have been made. The first thing I did as Prime Minister was to cut the carbon tax. That's the first thing. Second thing is made a
What a
commitment.
great idea.
Suspend. Didn't cut. Suspended. It'll be back.
Made a commitment that all proceeds from our tariffs will go to workers and those
Question was
companies
about
most
pipelines.
affected. There were several points
Means
raised.
nothing
and
so
if
far.
I may, Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it quickly because several points raised. All proceeds go to workers and the firms most effective, and those proceeds are considerable. Third thing, I'm interested in solutions. I'm interested in getting energy infrastructure built. That means pipelines, that means carbon capture storage, that means electricity grids. And here's how you do it. And we've already moved in the first month. Cooperation agreements with the provinces. Guess what? We are a federation. You need to cooperate with Quebec. You need to cooperate with the provinces. You need to get First Nations and Indigenous people buy-in. You can do that through the one project, one review window that we put in place at that first ministers' meeting. as well as, if necessary, using emergency powers to fulfill the federal responsibility, but not the uniqueness.
He wrote a book about the end of the oil industry. He said in his book, I quoted it recently, and I'm paraphrasing right now, that companies that get into line when it comes to net zero will be the ones that get rewarded, and the ones that don't will be left behind and disintegrate. He is committed and has been committed for decades to the end, not just of the Canadian oil and gas industry, but to global carbon industry in general, regardless of how it fuels our country's economy. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe there's 100 videos out there. This guy talking about the carbon tax in Canada and saying it's not high enough. He's had a change of heart? I don't know how anybody can buy it.
Poilievre, you want to come back on that?
What you're saying, Mr. Carney, with respect, is a total contradiction. The No New Development Law, C-69, guarantees there will not be one-stop shop because it requires the Government of Canada to actually duplicate
So
the
what
same,
Mr. Poilievre is saying is that
the
have no
same
rules,
project.
have no regulation,
have
have no
one-stop shop.
controls
Mr.
over,
Singh, let's
over
let,
any energy.
Mr. Singh,
Sorry,
we just
Mr.
got to let him
Singh,
Let
finish
big
his sentence.
polluters pollute.
Let's just let him finish his sentence.
That is not true. In fact,
That's only if you define pollution as carbon, Mr. Singh. Carbon is not pollution, but we need energy. And you talk about green energy all day, but you have no plan for how to generate the power or build the grid that you're talking about. You're literally just playing to people's emotions. You're playing off their ignorance. So
Mr.
disgusting.
Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple
the first
levels
time
of
I heard you care about
referral
the environment.
that it takes now 17 years to
that your
get a
position?
major project approved in this country. That is why in the last 10 years we've had the worst economic growth in the entire
Liberals
G7.
bought a pipeline and
we
built a
cannot
pipeline.
afford
They're
a
pretty
fourth
pro-pipeline.
liberal term. We need a change, and the Conservative plan for a change will include repealing the anti-pipeline law so we can get our energy to markets other than the United
Mr.
States.
Singh,
Remember that they opened this debate talking about the threat that Donald Trump posed to our sovereignty and to our people and the need to build resilience. And now, both Carney and Singh are talking about the need to not build that resilience, because anything that's built on energy, that's built on carbon, is subject to carbon pollution, as they call it. So what's their actual plan? Other than price controls, this guy wants to control the price of groceries. That's never worked anywhere in the world. He's irrelevant. He's not going to have a job
then
soon.
Mr.
Well,
Carney.
while these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, I mean, it's clear. The Liberals bought a pipeline. They built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about. That's what they did. I think what we need to do, if we're talking about energy in our country, we need to build an east-west grid. Let's use our power as a nation to build a national project that creates good jobs, that strengthens us for the future, where we connect the low-cost energy from jurisdictions and provinces across this beautiful land and have low-cost energy for businesses, for people, so we can build a stronger economy. That's the energy of the future that we need.
Mr. Carney.
3 quick points. First, the pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
So he said his record is only a month long. Yet here he is talking about things that happened long before a month ago, and more than happy to stand at the head of a party taking credit for it. You see how snaky this guy is?
I don't think that's a
Mr. Singh,
bragging point, though.
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the East-West grid. Grid interconnections, which is part of the energy corridor, huge opportunities for this country. We have to be able to do more than one thing. Third point, fundamental point. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever take away. If we have one Canadian economy, not 13, and if we just look at that agreement we got with the provinces, look at what Ontario and Nova Scotia have just announced in terms of their steps towards this, this is within our grasp.
This is something we have to be very careful of. When these guys talk about eliminating trade barriers between the provinces, talking about one economy versus 13, they're talking about more centralization. When this kind of stuff is in their hands, it's not about trade market liberalization. There's no reason to have this fight with the Americans in the first place. So they're talking about things that are completely unnecessary right out the gate. The Americans are our best geopolitical partners. There isn't a single person on the stage that's willing to say those words, that's willing to actually pin on the Liberals and the NDP responsibility for ruining that relationship. That's really what I would like to see.
Blanchet, what should we be prepared to concede in our negotiations with the United States?
I want to be back to something that Mr. Carney said. You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense. Quebec has, by law, its own environmental review institution, and you cannot, through a federal decision, even through a Quebec government decision, go over the BAP, as we call it. If the BAP says no,
Just say.
it's no.
I know. I know.
Good.
I know.
Here's the other thing. As much as I'm critical of Quebec, and I can talk about it all day, they are the province that's treating this federation in the proper way. What he just said is, we have a bunch of laws in regard to this. It means they're anti-development laws. You can disagree with those laws. But he's essentially saying the provincial law is more powerful than the federal law, and he's right. So when they talk about 13 economies versus a single economy, Quebec rightly views that as an existential crisis to their province. Why isn't every other province viewing it that way? I will never know. Quebec's the model to follow. You can hate them all you want. You can resent them for what they've done to the country, but they've showed the provinces the path. We just haven't had provincial leaders that are willing to walk it to great effect.
No,
Let's
but this
keep
is
that in mind.
This is the point. This is, if I may, this is the point. The federal government can do the following, which is to take the decision to abide by the decision of the Quebec BAP. That is within the federal government's power. That is known as cooperative federalism. That's what we need to do.
And do you
in a-
understand
this
one
is
other
what-
point
This is
fast?
what we need. This is what we need to do in a crisis.
We have Moïse and then Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah. The building of those pipelines will take at least 10 to 14 years. Mr. Trump will be 90 years old, not president no more,
might.
and somebody, of course, less terrible will be there before you can even dream of having oil through this pipeline of yours.
We're less than a minute to go. Mr. Poilievre.
And that's the other thing. The solutions that everybody on the stage is talking about when it comes to pipelines and all this stuff, these are solutions that should have been met 10 years ago because we might be bringing them online now. That's a really important distinction. So in the interim, right now, the only partner we have, the only geostrategic ally that we can possibly rely on is the United States. Now, what else is happening in the United States at the same time? They're issuing leases, which are being snapped up by developers. Drill, baby, drill is going to be a thing. So the Americans are going to flood the market with better quality oil than we have. Our position in the market is at risk of being displaced. So the western provinces, mainly Saskatchewan and Alberta, have only got a limited window to work something out with the United States so we don't get crushed between the externality of the market reality and the impending government in Ottawa, if indeed it is Mark Carney, which all of this will be forgotten in the name of net zero. He wrote I want to swear, he wrote a book about it.
Promised you next.
Listen, after the last 10 years of Liberals blocking pipelines and killing jobs,
Sounds wild when you
we
say that.
actually need to get things
that makes
done.
sense.
We need a change, and our conservative plan for change will repeal the No New Pipelines law. It will create a true one-stop shop, set up shovel-ready zones with pre-permitting so that we can approve LNG liquefaction export plants, mines, pipelines, nuclear plants, and also
said no.
hydroelectric dams so that we can generate the power we need to be strong, self-reliant, and stand on our own 2 feet for a change.
Last quick word to Mr. Carney.
Okay, quick word. Bringing it back to what we were talking about, which is tariffs, the threats to Canada, how to negotiate. We need these options. We need these options to build domestically, to build one Canadian economy. We need to act. We need to diversify our trade partners.
And that is
will
our
give us
time in this
strength to the
segment.
US.
That is our time. Okay, you know my job tonight. I got to be the heavy guy here every now and then, making sure everybody comes to.
The heavy guy. Letting everybody talk over each other. The heavy guy. Great moderation.
the time,
We've
and
got
I'm
great
keeping an eye as well on making sure that everybody gets rough justice over here. That concludes our first section and our first debate. Up next, affordability and the cost of living.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction.
You will lower your bills, build homes you can actually afford.
Il faudra parler des entreprises du Québec, des travailleurs du Québec, des aînés du Québec.
A big, powerful bring it home tax cut on work, investment, energy, and home building.
Ev, you get the first question this time. Many provinces, including some provinces with conservative governments, have ambitious housing targets, none of which have been met. Why do you think your housing plan will be any different?
Let me start by talking to the young people of the nation and those who are aspiring to home ownership. You know, it was only 10 years ago you could buy an average house for $450,000. But in the last lost Liberal decade, housing costs have doubled, rising faster than in any country in the G7. And so now our youth cannot afford a home, and our seniors are worried about being evicted. We can't afford a fourth Liberal term of rising housing costs. We need a change. And our Conservative plan for change will, 1, axe the federal sales tax on new homes. 2, incentivize municipalities to cut their construction taxes to bring houses down in cost by $100,000. 3, sell off federal land for homes. And 4, train up 350,000 young trades workers who can help build those homes. Because you deserve a home, and we're going to make it happen for a change.
Didn't talk about the causes behind that inflation. Didn't talk about the mass immigration, which is one part. Didn't talk about the money laundering and the rampant black market, which is another part. The mass scale accumulation of debt by the nation and by the provinces, and the money printing that's been going on. These are the things that are actually driving the housing crisis. Now, I admit, it's hard to pack a lot in 1 minute, but I think I've only been talking for 30 seconds, and I feel like I've already said something far more substantive.
Also on the issue of affordability, Mr. Singh, you get the next question. How do you bring down grocery prices in the midst of a trade war?
I appreciate the question. This is a big concern. When I talk to Canadians, they tell me they're really feeling squeezed from the cost of living. That's one of the top things that people tell me about. People are saying, I can't afford to buy groceries. Every time I go to the grocery store, it's...
Why does he have the pink do-rag? Can somebody tell me in the comments, what's with the pink do-rag? What does this symbolize?
just ongoing worry and this feeling of anxiety that can I actually afford the things that my family needs? On top of that, people are worried about the cost of homes. I think those are the two biggest things I hear. So we can do things about this. Other countries have taken concrete steps. We can put in a price cap on food essentials. France has done it, Greece has done it to great success. It's brought down the cost of food significantly in both those jurisdictions.
Price controls, full communism. Let's go.
We can also ban corporate landlords from buying up the affordable homes to keep homes that are affordable.
Investors and those with income properties, you're the bad guy. Not the government for printing money, not the rampant crime, not all the things I just talked about. It's you greedy scumbag, for owning a rental property. I understand that foreign ownership of land and housing is an issue, but it is foreign ownership. I got no problem with people owning rental properties. They targeted Airbnb owners after inviting the business model in. Trudeau, before he left, I don't know, this has completely disappeared. Maybe I need to look this up and do a segment on it. Because I remember that Airbnbs were being blamed for the housing shortage.
Affordable. We can make things better for Canadians, but it requires having the courage to take on the powerful corporations that are ripping you off, that are price gouging you. And we know that price gouging is one of the major reasons why food prices are going up. You're never going to hear Pierre Poilievre or Mr. Carney talk about the fact that these are the corporations
Thank you,
ripping you
Mr.
off.
Singh. That's time. Mr. Blanchet, I want to ask you about old age security, which will soon cost this country $100 billion annually. We understand you would like to expand it. How would you pay for that?
We would want it to be just for everybody.
He's not going to form a government. Why does his opinion matter on national policy? He's literally not going to form a government. His party is based on breaking the country up. Why are you asking him about his opinion on national policy?
Because the Liberals have created the discrimination
Why are we listening to
against
this?
elders, which are 65 to 75 years old having 10% less income from federal government than those who are over 75. But the best way to do it is to have everybody pay its fair share in terms of tax, which means that one should not be entitled to hide money in fiscal paradise in order not to pay him or his clients or friends, not to pay billions of dollars in taxes that could be used to help the situation of elders. Those are things which are supposed to be applied to everybody. There are a lot of questions to be answered about that. Other ways to do it is to reduce the pressure on housing price, to make sure that the whole budget of elders and families and workers can afford houses which have increased dramatically in
Merci,
price.
Monsieur Blanchet. That's time for this.
So the solution is to take more money. There's rich people who don't pay enough tax, so we just got to get deeper in their pockets. Now, if you look at a chart which shows the share that each income bracket pays into the system, you're going to find that the top 10% of earners pay for almost everything already. But his solution is we need more of their money. Do you know what happens if we take more? When your top earners are already losing half of their money back to the state, at the same time as you live in proximity to the United States, where they are cutting taxes and making a very favorable business climate, doing everything they can to empower Main Street at the expense of Wall Street. They want people building things in America again. Whether they're successful or not is another story. But as we raise taxes and they lower taxes, you will hear a giant sucking sound as all of your capital flees Canada. So there will be nowhere for this man who doesn't even intend to form a government. There will be no pockets for him to put his hands in.
This one, Mr. Carney, I want to ask you about housing, which over the past decade has gone from a problem to a crisis while the Liberals were in power. Is your policy on getting homes built any different from your predecessors, and how?
This is one of the reasons why I entered this contest, because of the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and the Trump crisis to help fix it.
The Trump crisis.
And I would say, look, the housing approach is fundamentally different because we need a fundamentally different approach. We need to build housing at a rate that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War.
We got to build modular homes. The model for those modular homes will be Hong Kong. Coffin housing. Do you know how many people you can fit in a building if they're all living inside of pods? And it just so happens that Brookfield has holdings in companies that build just those modular homes. He can't even disguise the smile on his face. He's seeing the dollars just flash in front of his eyes.
World War. We do need a fundamentally different approach. And with the fundamentally different approach, we can build an entirely new industry. So the question is how? Now, Mr. Poilievre and I agree on some things. Okay? I agree as well on reducing the tax on first-time home purchases as a way to buy. But I am focused on increasing the supply of homes and doing that in a way that uses Canadian technology and modular prefabricated housing, that uses Canadian lumber, including in reinforced timber, and uses Canadian workers. And in all respects, we're
It's like he's pitching on the Shark Tank.
Scaling up to double the rate of home building.
He's going to be in your pension funds.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. That's
Deep.
time. We now move to open forum here. And Mr. Singh, you get the first comment. Many of you have pledged to cut the GST on many aspects of buying a home. And Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, would you cut the GST on anything else in order to make life more affordable?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm the only one on this stage that fought to give people a GST holiday. Interestingly, while the GST holiday helps working class folks, middle class folks by taking off the GST off essentials, the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre voted against that. They opposed the idea of giving people, actual folks that need help, a tax break, and would rather give millionaires a tax break, which shows you whose side he's on, which is not surprising.
That's a bit of a bait and switch. That's a bit of a misnomer. It's we're going to let Poilievre hopefully speak to it.
But what is surprising is that Mr. Carney also said that giving people a break on their GST is a bad idea. Mr. Carney, why do you think giving a tax break to capital gains folks that earn more than $1 million is a good idea, but helping a family afford their groceries, helping people afford their bills for their internet, their cell phone, their home heating, giving them relief to take the GST off those is a
You know, I wasn't going to comment on comments until the end, but one just came up, and it's Carney will bring in unrealized capital gain. This was an idea that was floated not long ago. You'll be taxed on assets that you haven't even sold or converted into cash. It's a nightmare, not just for the people who are subject to it. It's a nightmare for accountants and, dare I say, the Canada Revenue Agency. I never thought I would feel so sorry for the CRA, but the Liberal government has screwed things up so much with every single layer of their programs that they don't know whether they are coming or going. A tax on unrealized capital gains is nightmare fuel.
Bad idea, but giving a tax break to people who really only earn over more than $1.4 million, that's somehow a good idea.
Okay, you went after
That's your numbers.
You went after Mr. Poilievre first, so I'm going to give him the first shot to respond.
Well, Mr. Carney, the reality is that housing costs doubled under the Liberal government, while Justin Trudeau made exactly the same promises that you are now repeating today. He promised that he would double home building. In fact, home building went down. He promised that he'd reduce the cost. In fact, it went up. And now here we are. Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house. Just a few weeks ago, before the election, the Liberals voted against taking the GST off new homes, and they have...
Look at Jagmeet Singh with his hand up, looking like a fool. Like, man,
to build up bureaucracies that block construction. We need a change so that you can afford a home. And our change will be, again, to axe the sales tax on new homes, incentivize municipalities to speed up permits, free up land, and cut development costs. Train up 350,000 young people who can be in the trades to build those homes and sell off the land that is going to be needed in order to build homes. That is a real plan for you to own a home and afford your life for a change.
Now, there's a couple ways to approach a debate. One is what Poilievre is doing, and that's to deliver your message and what exactly it is that you're going to do once you're in government. And that's the method that he's chosen. The other method is the method that I took when I was in my debates, and that was responding to things in the moment. I talked a little bit about policy, but I also just did a bunch of rebuttals, and I talked in the moment. And I often wonder if debates are far more useful if you engage. So you get asked a question and you only get so much time. But what I did is I kept notes about the things that I wanted to talk about most and the specific things I wanted to respond to my opponents about. And I would dedicate maybe 10 or 12 seconds to the question, and then I would use the rest of my time to attack and create an atmosphere. And I know there's no audience here, so I know there's going to be no applause. I know they've all been instructed. But there's this whole audience of people watching who can get engaged through aggressive debating. He's delivering a message.
Carney, they're coming at you from both sides. What do you say?
Okay. I know it may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
But his party isn't. It's the same people. They all applauded when he signed the fake executive order that so-called ended the carbon tax, but they all just a week prior were telling you the carbon tax was necessary and making you richer. Again, Poilievre's right. How can you reward these people with a fourth term?
Focus is on results.
Were you his economic
and so how
advisor?
to drive results in the housing market, you've got to change the model of building. You've got to increase the financing for housing developers, $25 billion on the table for those housing developers, $10 billion for deeply affordable homes, cutting development charges in half.
Deeply affordable homes, coffin homes, so-called modular homes. You wait for it.
Lowering the cost
CCAN homes.
of the building of those homes by 20%. And lowering the emissions and the run costs of those homes by another 20%. This is how you drive affordability. This is how you bring young people back into the housing market.
Exactly what Trudeau
and then Mr.
promised.
Singh.
You claim to be very different from Mr. Trudeau. Now, the point is to show that you are any better than Mr. Trudeau. You claim to have a lot of experience in many things, and you know things. Last time we had somebody saying that they knew things, it was the senators, and they killed the law that protected supply management because they knew better than us and were elected by nobody, exactly like you are today. You say that you are a great crisis manager. Which one? I heard of nothing. As far as I know, Brexit happened, even if you were against it. You say you are
Against it as the governor of the Bank of England. He shouldn't have been involved. His opinion shouldn't have been offered. It's a dereliction of duty, according to his own book, which I am still working my way through tirelessly.
a great negotiator. What have you negotiated but fiscal paradises in Bermudas or Cayman Islands? You have to prove something, and you have to reveal what you own in those companies if you want people to believe you.
Mr. Singh, you wanted to.
Yes, returning to the topic of
That's actually a really good point. We should be seeing Carney's books.
housing. Now, it's very important. Obviously, we need to build homes that people can afford. Mr. Poilievre had the opportunity to show us what he could do. He was the Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper. And during that time, guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes during that entire time.
Guess how much they were worth, you interesting individual who's standing on this stage? Back in the time that you're talking about was the time I managed to buy my house for $128,000. I didn't even make a full down payment on it. I paid $5,000, and the lady that sold it to me, she wrote the other $5,000 down and helped me out that way because she'd been charging me more on rent. I bought it from her like on a rent to own basis. Anyway, $128,000 for a 3-bedroom house on 1.5 acres in the time frame that JAG is talking about.
This is not something you can
Did the government need to build homes when you could afford to buy one?
trust to build homes. He built 6
200,000.
homes.
200,000.
And this has been confirmed again and again. He built 6 homes. That's it. Now, the problem, though, with Mr. Carney as well, he's laid out a plan. The problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision to buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto, where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when Mr. Carney, you profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Poilievre first, Mr. Carney second.
First of all, Mr. Singh,
hold this up to remind you.
the Toronto
6 right
Star, the Toronto Star debunked your falsehoods.
it was 6
on that.
homes, and
I
that's the
appreciate
facts.
neither Liberals or NDP are very good with math, but in that
You're
year, the
clearly
year
a-
I was
Where is the moderator?
Count up to
minister, if I
6, which
could,
is great.
the year
Count up to 6.
I
Mr.
was
Singh, let's let him answer.
in the year
It's
I
not
was
high enough, though.
the year I was minister, we had 200,000 homes built, and guess what the average price of a home was at the time? $450,000.
And guess what happened
And
at the end of the
one
Conservative-
There he is again. There's a justification for getting physical sometimes. That would just trigger me so intensely if I was involved in that debate. I'd shut that down because I can be louder than anybody.
1-bedrooms rented out for $900, and that's since that time. Housing costs have actually doubled under the Liberals.
They doubled
and
under
now we have
Conservatives, too.
now we have Mr. Carney making tens of billions of dollars of spending promises that will
doubled under
ultimately
you as well.
continue to build bureaucracy. We don't need more bureaucracy in Ottawa. We tried that for 10 Liberal years, Mr. Carney. What we need is to build homes in communities.
Certainly
And
don't
that
need
means
Conservatives.
axing taxes on home building and getting the government out of the way so that builders can actually build.
I think-
Mr.
Mr.
Carney,
Can I pick
you
up-
are on housing. We need a change, and you, sir, are not a change.
One of the things that he didn't say, it's not 10 years of Liberal government. The last 5 have been Liberal NDP government. The entire time, Singh has propped up the Liberals. So the problems that he's complaining about, just like Carney, are his responsibility. This guy sold the NDP out. The NDP is in debt. It will never recover. They're lucky if they get 2 or 3 seats out of this election. That's my prediction. Maybe I'm going to be wrong. They're in bad shape. He didn't even bargain for a cabinet seat. He got nothing. His leadership skills have been demonstrated.
Mark Carney.
I'm going to pick up on, I thought that answer was quite revealing. The first thing is that it's an attitude towards housing that absolutely ignores affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, issues with vulnerable people, ignores the rental market, ignores all other aspects of it. So the 6 are the relevant. Mr. Singh is absolutely right. The 6 are the relevant.
200,000.
The 200,000 are a different part of the housing market. There are many Canadians. There are many Canadians at different income levels. The second thing it reveals is a misunderstanding, I'll be polite, of how the government's balance sheet can catalyze enormous private investment. And that is what we need to do to solve the housing crisis. It happens to be what we need to do as a whole to address the economic crisis that's been forced on us by President Trump.
By President Trump again. So centralization is the solution. The government creating, which is interfering in markets, dictating markets, it's just another form of price control by indirect. And he has to bring Trump into it again because he counts on the 60% of Canadians who irrationally hate the orange man. That's why he mentions it. His whole election plan is to win based on him being the guy that can best oppose Donald Trump. The problem is Brookfield, Mark Carney, Elon Musk, Donald Trump are all inextricably linked. His own company has put out advisors to their investors saying he will fold like a house of cards when the election's over. And it's true, because everything that he's saying right now is contradicted by a book that he himself wrote 3 years ago. You literally can't believe anything coming out of this man's mouth.
Mr. Blanchet?
Yeah. You have spoken much more than I have, so I won't ask a question. I will make a statement instead. I'm not saying that you cannot do what you pretend that you are able to do. We just have no proof so far. I'm saying quite clearly that you cannot be entitled to do it alone. You cannot be entitled to hold all the power in your two hands. You cannot go out there and fix things for Canada and Quebec without being seriously checked by serious people. You cannot go out there and speak for Quebec without Quebec having its own strong voice to protect itself and to promote its different economy. So if you want to collaborate, let's say right now that whatever happens, even if minority government happens, you will be a partner with the different Quebec economy and identity, which you have been not interested in for the economic part and not respectful for the identity part.
Let me get Mr. Singh in at this point. Can you tell us what's the first thing you would do to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do, and I've laid out some of those things. I think fundamentally, I'm the only person on stage that not only fought for real relief for people in terms of affordability, I'm the only one that fought for pharmacare that actually makes life more affordable by giving people medication coverage, dental care that gives people more affordability by letting them access their services if you're a senior and a kid. I fought for childcare to make sure people could afford childcare. All measures that Mr. Poilievre voted against, all measures that Mr. Blanchet voted against. So if you want someone that's going to fight for you in Ottawa to actually make life more affordable, you can't entrust all the power to Mr. Carney. He doesn't have a track record of making life more affordable for people, but we do. So.
Okay, you have a track record of making life more affordable. Let's assume that that is indeed true. Who did you work with to make life more affordable? That's the track record that Carney's people, the entire Liberal Party, is running on, the track record that you helped them create. But we know that the affordability talking point isn't actually real because all of the programs that you're talking about came at the expense of the Canadian taxpayer and not even the existing taxpayers, the ones that haven't even been born yet, paid for by the future. You can't take money from nothing and put it into the economy for any purpose without increasing prices. Jag, you just don't understand economics, and I'm afraid there's a lot of Canadians that they think the free stuff comes from some kind of magical fairy government above, and it actually is just borrowed against the future.
Vote for a New Democrat, and we'll continue this work to make life more affordable for you. While the Conservatives and the Bloc have voted against those measures to make life affordable, because that's not who they care about, New Democrats are in it for you.
Pierre Poilievre.
The number one expense for families today is taxes, more than they spend on food, clothing, and shelter combined. This after 10 years of Liberal tax increases. We can't afford a fourth term of high Liberal taxes. That's why Conservatives have a plan for change. And that plan
Your plan
includes
voted
cutting
against every measure to help people
if I
out.
could, cutting income taxes by 15% for the average worker and seniors, saving a working couple up to $2,000, rewarding hard work again. Because
How much do you
hard
think
work
childcare
is
costs?
actually being
Dental care
punished.
costs.
Is actually being punished because of the very high taxes. Now, the Liberals promised 10 years ago they would lower them. They actually raised taxes on 9 out of 10 Canadians. We need a change in this country because your hard work should once again pay off with a powerful paycheck that buys you an affordable affordable home
wanna save
on a
people
safe street,
$2,000?
and that's what we will deliver.
You want to save people too?
I really wish Jagmeet would shut up, and I wish the moderator would do his job. The man just talks over Polyev and only Polyev. He lets everybody else talk, but he goes after Polyev. And
$2,000, but cut their dental care, which
false.
is thousands of dollars.
False.
Cut their child care, which is thousands.
do you know that your child care is already heavily subsidized, particularly for the poor? A child's food and clothing is practically paid for by the taxpayer if you're under the income threshold of $37,000 a year. But setting that aside, when it comes to dental and it comes to outside medical expenses, there's also a mechanism for writing off some of that. It's a bit convoluted, and maybe that write-off could be extended or simplified so that you get more out of that write-off. But you don't necessarily have to have the state paying for everything. If you have lower taxes, you have more money to buy care. And the interesting thing about private care is it delivers better care. The Canadian healthcare system is captured. That's why its care output is declining. We don't have world-class healthcare in Canada, as anybody that's tried to experience the system would be able to tell you.
Thousands of dollars. Cut pharmacare coverage, which is thousands of dollars.
False.
That's not a very good math deal right there. You're gonna save people $2,000, but cost them tens of thousands of dollars. That's why you cannot afford conservatives, and you certainly can't trust the Liberals
Mark
on their
Carney's
own.
turn.
You need New Democrats.
Mark Carney.
I'm going to reinforce that point, and then I'll respond to Mr. Blanchet. Child care in this country, $3,000 to $10,000 a year for a family, depending.
Because your tax burden's so high, you have to send both parents to work to pay the taxes to then pay someone else to raise your kids for you. That is not a good system. Turn back the clock 50 years. One parent went out and worked, had a much lower tax burden, and mom, mainly mom, was able to stay home and nurture the future with the kids, which is that's the way it should be. It's the way the Lord set it up. This talk about childcare and the necessity for childcare, it's only a conversation because the tax burden is so high and it's so hard to live. And their recommendation is you outsource the rearing of your children to the lowest common denominator, the cheapest worker that you can get. Lowering the cost of childcare is actually saying we have to lower the quality of delivery. And you lose your kids.
Depending on where you live.
Province, jurisdiction.
Depending on where you live, that's what's being saved there. $800 per trip to the dentist. We have expanded dental care
Province,
to 8
jurisdiction.
million Canadians.
Because we
8
forced-
million Canadians.
because New Democrats were there.
Pharmacare. These are fundamental issues for affordability. We're talking about affordability and taking them off in order.
That's why you
to
need New
cut
Democrats.
tax.
That's not what I've said.
And in
I will be
terms
cutting
of
income taxes
working with Quebec,
for Canadians.
yes, absolutely. Throughout the short time I've been Prime Minister, working directly with the Premier of Quebec, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance are from Quebec. Quebec and Quebec issues, whether it's
Why
supply
haven't you answered
management,
Mr.
language,
Legault's letter? He asked 5 things in the letter. He reduced his expectations.
We're talking about-
And you did not even answer him. And tonight, you are so much in love with Quebec.
Steve, the question that Canadians have to ask,
Why vote for
Whether-
conservatives?
why-
We're going to
why-
save
why-
$2,000.
He's got the,
cost you
Mr.
tens of
Singh,
thousands.
Mr. Singh, sorry, he has the floor. Come on.
the question you have to ask is, after a decade of Liberal promises, can you afford food? Is your housing more affordable than it used to be? What is your cost of living like compared to what it was a decade ago? And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal staffers all over again for a fourth term. Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much. The biggest risk we have to affordability, the biggest risk we have to this economy
Is Donald Trump.
There
There it
First
is.
and foremost, we've got to get that right. Secondly, we need to do it in a way that brings everyone along together.
He's in bed with Trump and many of the people in his administration. Their money is tied together. He raises the specter of Donald Trump. It's not even that big a deal. Not once does he talk about China. China's inroads into Canada, Chinese tariffs, China executing citizens instead of extraditing them. Nothing. Just the orange man. Because he counts on the Canadian public to be ignorant, so he plays off that. This is not a leader. This is a snake.
That means preserving pharmacare, dental care, child care, reinforcing health care, spending our whole social safety.
Intrusion in
clock is
Quebec
on-
jurisdiction over and again. I like
The
if
clock is
we're
on
any
zero.
better than we are.
The clock is
there
on zero.
one thing Canadians can do that Quebecers cannot do? You are doing intrusions in our jurisdiction with our money, pretending you are better, and most of the time you try to copy what we did with our own money against us. What's that as a policy? Don't you have your own things to care about?
That
Taking everything off the table when it comes to equalization and everything else. Once again, Quebec is showing you how to do it as a province. He's right. When the federal government talks about centralization, they're talking about removal of provincial jurisdiction. Quebec is the only one that fully deploys provincial jurisdiction to the point when they haven't even signed the Constitution. So they've done it right. They provide the model. Blanchett's right. The other premier should be listening, because I've said long ago, this federal election, I know what I'm doing. I know who I'm voting for. It's kind of a throwaway, though. My hope lies with the provinces. And that's where we should pursue autonomy and liberty and sovereignty for the citizen.
really is time for this segment. I wanted to be polite and let everybody finish their points,
I'm
but
far
we got to
beyond,
move
so
on.
I took the liberty.
Thank you. Okay, that ends section 2. Up next, public safety and security.
Fight crime, to protect Canadians, and to build communities that are safe, secure, and strong.
Keep crime, drugs, stolen cars, and other illegal substances out of our country.
We're going to invest in our borders, and that means hiring more border officers.
Resources are in short supply, not enough staff. This is not the nice way to treat people who come to our border.
Okay, same format, one-on-one questions and then open debate. Mr. Blanchet, you get to go first in this one. Public safety and security. For a lot of people, that means the fentanyl crisis. I'd like to know what you could contribute to ending that crisis in this country.
The fentanyl crisis is a very serious issue, which is a bit less important in Quebec than it is in British Columbia. I think the whole border thing is the real issue. Immigration is a very important issue for Quebecers. Immigration has to be dealt with in an orderly fashion. Our borders are not dealt with in an orderly fashion. The rules are not respected. The rules are unclear. Some rules even invite people to hide for 2 weeks illegally before coming out. Some things has to be done. The situation of one person asking for asylum may take as much as 4 years without us reducing the number in order to deal with them in a human way. The services for every citizen in Quebec are being reduced because we cannot afford the fact that we are receiving much more people in Quebec from this specific type of immigration than we can afford, and we cannot teach them French.
The question was about fentanyl.
Time, Mr. Blanchet. We can, of course, return to the immigration issue during open debate should you choose to. Mr. Carney, question for you. The Liberal gun buyback policy, not considered a success by many people. Reviving it is in your platform. Why would it work this time?
Yeah, I think, well, what we've seen with that policy is some success at the commercial level, but not at the individual level, because it hasn't been in my opinion, it hasn't been organized properly, and it needs to be organized properly. And I've instructed the Minister of National Security and Public Safety in order to do that. So part of this is a different focus of government, a focus on results, a focus on clear milestones in the short term. Let me make a broader point, though, on gun, which is that we have a problem with guns coming over borders, which is why we've tightened our borders. We have an issue, though, with a gun industry that is continually coming up with new forms of assault rifles, mass killing machines. We've banned over 2,000 of these. Every single time there has been a vote in the House of Commons on gun control, Mr. Poilievre has voted against it. You can't be tough on crime unless you're tough.
They're hunting rifles with stocks swapped out. That's what they are. These guns are not being used in crime. By definition, Canadian gun owners wouldn't have them if they were being used in crime. We don't get to have guns if we screw up. It doesn't matter what we do. The government will come along and take them already. Unbelievable. The guns that they're taking away aren't the ones coming across the border. The guns that are doing the killing in this country are illegal handguns, not rifles, not mass killing machines. Any gun is a mass killing machine. Okay, let's be honest. If even you've got a 5-round clip and you've got a decent shot, you can probably take out 4 or 5 people with that. Easy. It's a bogus talking point, and it doesn't do anything to enhance public safety, because gun owners, licensed gun owners, are the literal best vetted Canadians. Period. Gangbangers don't get vetted. They don't go get licenses. I hope Poilievre has a good answer. I don't even want to turn this back on.
On guns.
Mr. Poilievre, you can come back on that in the open debate if you want to, but my question...
Oh my God, they're not even going to let him talk?
Indigenous people are statistically overrepresented in our corrections system. Are you
because they
concerned
commit more
that your
crimes?
tough on crime platform will make that worse?
I'm concerned that Indigenous people are disproportionately the victims of crime.
That is
I'll give
true.
you the example of a wonderful group of Indigenous people who came under attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. Killer was out of jail after 60 prior convictions. This is the result of 10 years of liberal laws that allow the same offenders to be released dozens and dozens of times, even when it's known they are a danger. We can't risk a 4th liberal term of soft on crime policies. We need a change. And the Conservative plan for change will bring in a 3 strikes you're outlaw. 3 convictions for serious crimes, you go to jail for at least 10 years, maybe for life, no chance of parole or bail. We will bring in life sentences for traffickers of fentanyl, human beings, and guns, and we will secure our borders to keep the illegal
Thank you,
guns
Mr.
out.
Poilievre. That's time. Mr. Singh, your question is about the RCMP, because you've got RCMP reform in your platform. What, in your view, is the problem with the RCMP?
Well, some of the basis for this is the concern that's been raised in more rural communities and northern communities that there have been some serious concerns about violence.
I'll pause it because no one really cares what he has to say. I don't like this format where each person gets a different question. What is that all about? Let them have debate. Let them discuss.
Or inappropriate use of force when it comes to the execution of their duties. We want to make sure that we've got a top-tier police force that provides security and safety to those communities in a way that's sensitive and understanding of the communities they're serving. I also think what's very important is for Indigenous communities, Indigenous policing. This is an area of deep concern. I think everyone in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home, safe when you go to work, safe if you take public transit, safe for your kids to be able to play in the local playground, and that's something I'm committed to. The other area that I'm focused on when it comes to public safety is making sure we prevent crime before it happens, and that's why we want to see increased investments in our border security. We saw under the Conservatives, they cut 1,100 border officers in one day. So that prevented our ability to keep our borders safe. That stops those materials from coming in.
Maybe the Conservatives were more efficient, because I was alive back then. We didn't have this huge border problem when Harper was in office. We didn't have 1 million people coming into the country every single year. We had 250,000. Seemed like it was way too high when it peaked under Stephen Harper, but man, does it ever look cottage when you look back on it.
Time. Not sure it was about the RCMP, but maybe we can get back to that during the open debate segment, which we go to right now. And Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word on this one, and it sort of dovetails on the last answer you gave, which is, you have pledged to be the first prime minister in this country to use the notwithstanding clause, setting aside charter rights of, as you call them, multiple murderers. Why do you think that's necessary?
To be clear, I want to uphold the charter rights of Canadians under Section 7 to life, liberty, and security of the person.
That's a good talking point.
That right is violated by multiple murderers who are given discounts. The case in question was a gentleman who went into a mosque and shot dead 6 innocent worshippers. He got, according to this ruling, only one 25-year sentence, meaning he could be out in his 50s. He only serves 4 years for every murder that he carried out. That is outrageous, and I will use the constitutional powers that are created for this purpose to ensure that mass murderers stay in maximum security penitentiary for life. They will only come out in a box. We will also pass tough new laws that prevent repeat offenders from getting out. If you commit 3 offenses under the 3 strikes law I propose, you will not be allowed out of jail until you prove that you are drug-free, that you are behaved perfectly, and that you've learned an employable skill, and you've served a 10-year sentence. We cannot allow liberal crime and chaos to go on terrorizing our communities. What we need is a real plan for change so that we can bring back the safety and the security that Canadians used to take for granted.
Let me get...
Before they try and ride roughshod over this, that is 100% one of the biggest differences between the Conservative Party and everybody else on that stage. They will actually put criminals in jail. You shouldn't have to worry about your wife and kids going out into public. You shouldn't have to worry about your children riding public transit to get to high school and having to deal with violent criminals along the way. We shouldn't have, as I highlighted in one of my recent videos, a person getting stabbed in the morning and then running into the person who stabbed them on the street later in the afternoon because they've been released on their own cognizance. This tough on crime agenda is long overdue.
Get Mr. Carney to respond to that. You think that's an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause of the Charter?
I think that the one of the core responsibilities of the federal government, Prime Minister, is to defend the fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians. And those fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians are outlined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is 43 years old literally today. I think it's a very dangerous slope to override judgments of the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms exists to protect Canadians.
Quebec has used the notwithstanding clause at least 12 times. Calm down, Mark.
From people like us on the stage, politicians who may use their power to override fundamental rights. And the issue in using by the federal government, I'll stop here, is not where you start, but where will you stop?
Mr. Poilievre, I should get Mr. Poilievre on that. Is it a slippery slope if you use it in this case?
I must say, I would be quite interested too, because Mr. Carney said that he didn't want us to use the notwithstanding clause before adopting a law. And yesterday he said that he felt that it was wrong to use the notwithstanding clause after a law is adopted. So if we cannot use it before and we cannot use it after, it means that Mr. Carney believes that we should never use it. But it is very important. And the Ford case made it clear. The Constitution says how it should be used, but never how or what we will do with it, because it's the prerogative of the provinces. So do you want the Supreme Court to overrule another judgment of the same Supreme Court because you don't like it? Because that would be being the hell of a politician as you define them.
Well, let me just start by saying, first of all, thank you. I just started by saying, let's not let Mr. Poilievre get away with making this ludicrous claim that anyone that...
This started with the moderator saying I should give Poilievre a chance to respond. Blanchett broke in, and now why this guy is talking? He's responding to Poilievre, who hasn't even answered, and the issue at hand is what Carney had to say.
on this stage thinks that violent crime should get a less severe penalty. Obviously, that is not a special position that he's taking. Everyone agrees that.
No. You don't agree, because it's you and your partner in the Liberal government. You guys together are the ones that loosened these sentences and bail conditions. C-75, one of the biggest sentences and reduced mandatory minimums to non-existent for violent offenders, all while you target legal lawful gun owners for property seizure.
Horrible crimes should have horrible sentences. Judges are equipped to do that, so don't let Mr.
Why didn't he do it? Why didn't the Liberals do it? Instead, they liberalized everything and put them back on the street. Like, this guy is a worse liar than Justin Trudeau.
Poilievre's rhetoric confused people. Obviously, everyone agrees that if someone does something horrible, they should pay a horrible price for it. There should be appropriate sentence.
I am going to address one comment, Bitcoin Bits. Why isn't Pierre interrupting? Because his angle, what he's going for, is class. He's trying to look like the reasonable one on the stage. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but that's the path he's taken. He's interrupting Carney a little bit, but if I can use a colloquial, he doesn't look like a total asshole like Jagmeet Singh does right now.
That's put in place by a judge. But what I'm concerned about is all of what Mr. Poilievre is talking about is after the fact. Now, there's heinous things that happen, and there needs to be severe penalties put in place. But we also need to keep communities safe. And that's what my focus is. Well, how do we stop crime before it happens? Much of the violent crime that's committed is committed by illegal handguns and firearms that come across the border. Now, Mr. Poilievre has admitted that as well, that it is illegal handguns and illegal weapons that are used in violent crime. So our plan is, let's stop those illegal weapons getting into our country in the first place. And the way we do that is by having stronger border security officers and having more people on the border. Mr. Pierre Poilievre, when he was in power in the Conservatives, they cut the number of border officers. Okay. They reduced the number, weakening our borders.
Keeping an eye on time
Can't
here.
trust them
Let's
to
get
do
back
these
to
type of
Mr.
things.
Poilievre on the issue of whether, in using the notwithstanding
At least
clause
he came
under these
back to him. At
circumstances,
least he
would
came
be a
back to
kind of
him.
a slippery slope and encourage politicians to use it more.
No, we will use it to protect the charter rights of law-abiding Canadians. I'm interested in the rights of victims. Mr. Carney seems to be very interested in the rights of criminals. He says that it's dangerous for me to ensure that mass murderers stay behind bars for life. You know what's dangerous? Turning them loose on our streets. I don't think you appreciate, sir, the chaos that is unfolding in communities. In Toronto right now, the police have been forced to tell people to just let the thief steal the car. When they break into the house, just take the keys. Just let them take the keys so that you don't get hurt. People are living in terror in many of our communities precisely because of the catch and release bail law, C-75, which requires judges release the accused at the earliest opportunity under the least onerous conditions. Every single member of your Liberal caucus and your Liberal cabinet voted in favor of this bill, and they are all determined to keep it in place despite constant promises to the contrary. Mr. Carney, Canadians deserve to live in peace and security. That is the right that I'm fighting for a change.
That was strong, very accurate, and more often than not, the police are doing their jobs. It's the justice system that is failing everybody by putting these people back out on the streets. C-75 enables that, and you'll never hear them talk about C-75. I'm so glad Pierre brought that up, because this is one of his strongest segments.
I'm fighting for that as well, and let me be specific about two things that have been raised. The first is with respect to these issues of car theft, home invasion, and I'll use the GTA area where there has been a sharp increase. How do you attack that? You attack it several ways. One, you increase the criminal penalties for that happening, particularly if you're part of a gang, particularly if you use a firearm.
And you will do that?
And we're doing so. We've committed to doing so. You put in place a reverse onus in terms of bail, so that it has to be proven that there's not a risk, which we've also committed to. And then you go to what Mr. Singh was talking about, which is we have to reinforce our frontiers. That's why we're committing to an extra 1,000 Canada Border Service agents, an extra 1,000 RCMPs. That's why, as part of the broader fentanyl initiative, where we've added to the RCMP there, we've added drones, we're adding helicopters, we're adding surveillance, and we're going to the other end of the chain with respect to car theft, which is tightening security at the ports.
None of that addresses C-75. None of that addresses bail conditions and sentencing. Everything he's talking about is on the enforcement side, not the justice side. You can have battle tanks parked at the street corners of every single city. If the justices don't put the criminals in jail, it's all useless. They want the chaos. These guys are the architect of safe supply, needle exchanges, all of the bad ideas that have led us here. More police can't solve the problem. You have to incarcerate.
Is what we need. In order to get results, you need to focus where at both ends of the chains in federal.
Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about one of the issues that has come up is the idea of the public safety concerns around the overdose crisis and how this is devastating our communities. We're seeing so many lives being lost. In that, we know that one of the ways to address that is by investing in some of the solutions like mental health services and rehabilitation services. Services keep our communities safe, having access to those good services. Both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre are proposing cutting government spending and cutting those services.
You have to cut government spending, you doughhead. You can't keep running things the way that they've been running. Like this guy. He's got to just be aiming for, like, not even voters. This has got to be selling to 14 and 15-year-olds who are, like, reading Teen Bop or something. Like, I don't even know who he's after. It shows in the polls.
It's not going to make our community safer. We need to see better investments in rehabilitation services, more investments in mental health. We need to respond to this serious crisis in our country with care and compassion. I've met with Moms Stop the Harm, an organization of moms that have lost their children to this opioid overdose crisis. They've literally had their children have died because of this. And they're saying we need to do everything possible to save lives, to stop this death from happening. And I think we need to listen to those moms, and that's my commitment.
Ms. Blanchet.
Two things as rapidly as possible. First, we believe that we should act on crime gangs and organizations, defining them as we do for terrorist organizations. We have to protect our kids from the violence of those gangs, from the drugs being sold by those gangs.
One of the things I'm detecting here is we've addressed in the chat, and I think I've addressed the fact that Singh seems to only be going after Poilievre. Well, Blanchett doesn't seem to be going after Poilievre at all. This is the jerry-rigging pre-election. Just in case the Conservatives get a minority, you can bet your biscuit who they're going to govern with.
From the guns and whatever else being stolen,
smuggled,
sale, being by those gangs.
Sold?
And not stolen, being, you purchase a thing and selling, sold by those gangs. And we mostly have to protect our kids from being recruited by those gangs, becoming violent at 13 and 14 and 16 years old, because this is the real fear of parents like I am. This is a very dangerous situation. I want to come back to immigration because we said that we would come back to immigration. Do you remember the Century Initiative, a sad memory? Officially, they said that they had not considered Quebec difference. They had not considered Quebec language. They wanted Canada to be a 100 million people country by the end of the century. Mr. Barton told me himself that he had not even thought about the Quebec difference in that analysis. And one of his closest collaborators is now a close counselor to Mr. Carney, which seems to be part also of that kind of project or ideology. So it is impossible for Canada to have all those people come into Canada. It is impossible for Quebec to receive all those people. And in Quebec, we have the language and values and secularity of the state issue, which is very important. So I say, pause. Let's do things properly. Let's receive migrants in an orderly fashion and successfully as a measure of respect for them also.
Mr. Poilievre, you wanted a word.
I speak to families all the time who are terrified by the scourge of drugs and illegal guns. And we know those guns are not Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle. So when the Liberals try to ban hunting rifles, they're really going after the wrong people. 90% of guns that come in that are used in crime are smuggled illegally over the porous, Liberal-run borders.
border
and that's
that you
why
cut
the police,
border officers.
it's not true, and that's
You
why
literally
the
cut
police,
the border officers in the
actually,
facts.
if I could, the police actually endorsed
do it
me.
again.
The police in Barrie, in Peel, in Sault Ste. Marie have all endorsed me because they know that I will go after the gun smugglers and criminals with 2,000 extra frontline border guards that will stop the guns
After you
from
cut
coming
them,
in.
now you wanna hire
But unlike the Liberals and NDP, I will not ban hunting rifles. The Liberals want to
We never
protect.
wanted to ban
I want to
them.
protect Canadians from criminals. The Liberals want to protect turkeys from hunters. I think we know which one makes the most
Carney,
sense.
quick.
I can't wait for Jagmeet Singh to lose his seat and be gone from politics. The man has no class. He has no morals. He has no center. And I hate the sound of his voice almost as much as I learned to despise the sound of Trudeau's.
Intervention, Mr. Carney, and then I got a question for each of you before this segment's out.
Okay. We absolutely fully support hunting rights.
No, you don't. It's a lie. You keep telling the lie. You're banning hunting rifles. End of story.
Hunters and Indigenous Canadians. But I want to raise an issue which is a serious issue, talking about safety. There are people, we're in Montreal, in Toronto, across this country, who fear going to their synagogue, fear going to their community center, fear taking their children, leaving their children in school. And this has to stop. This is it's totally unacceptable. So what we're proposing is to make it a criminal offense to threaten or to impede anyone from being near or going to their place of worship, their school, their community center. This, it pains me that when we have to do it, because this is not what we should be doing as Canadians, of course,
Okay.
but we will put that in place.
Let me get
Respect. And this is a fundamental issue with respect
Let me
to
get
any
10
senator.
seconds from each of you before this segment's out on what you perceive to be the biggest security threat to Canada right now. 10 seconds each. Mr. Poilievre.
The physical security threat to our country is the rampant crime wave that is running out of control. After the last decade, we had a 116% increase in gun crime. We
Okay,
need to
that's
lock
10
up the
seconds.
criminals.
I got to hold you to
secure
10
the borders.
seconds. Mr. Carney?
Well, we're in a security section. I think we didn't have a chance to talk about anything internationally. I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you said.
He said China. He said the
Biggest
words.
security threat, illegal guns and drugs coming across
Wow.
the border, and cuts to services that would make our public safety and security even worse.
Last word to Ms.
Once again, that just highlights my thesis that perhaps Mark Carney is more aligned with the United States than he is carrying on. Because if he actually identifies China as a security threat, and he's not just saying this to feed the public, it really lends to the notion that he's going to fold like a house of cards as soon as the election's done. There could be a lot of coordination at the highest levels going on here, and me being me, I don't want to go along with it. I've been saying that in my video work about the Conservative Party. Everybody seems to want them beat. I want to see Poilievre have a shot. Whether he does good or doesn't is irrelevant. I want to see him give a try.
Mr. Blanchet.
The fact that neither Quebec or Canada is able to protect itself and that we are still dependent and entirely dependent on Americans to protect us.
Okay, that is the end of that section. Gentlemen, up next, energy and climate.
I can't believe he said China. He's going to get in trouble when he gets home.
Improving pipelines, getting things built, unleashing production.
We are unlocking major infrastructure projects, including in conventional energy, oil and gas.
We're speaking thousands of dollars a year for each family to pay for the damages of climate change.
We can absolutely build important projects like an east-west energy grid.
Energy and climate change. I know how much all of you love talking about pipelines, so here
Lord
we go.
Almighty,
Mr.
save
Singh,
me
to you
from
first.
this.
Should Canada build new pipelines to get our oil and gas to market?
Well, it's not an approach I favor with public money. There's not any projects that are on the table, so it's not a specific project to look at. I favor, when it comes to the environment, building an east-west energy grid that connects low-cost energy and allows for families to reduce their electricity costs. But let's put this all in context. We're talking about what our energy solutions are in the context of a climate crisis. And we're not just talking about a climate.
There's no climate crisis. There is no climate crisis. I would love to hear Pierre Poilievre say there's no climate crisis. I can't hold my breath on it.
Crisis in the far future. We're living it right now. I remember I met a mom a couple years ago before I had kids who told me she was worried about taking her kids out on some days because of the forest fires in BC. It meant that it was unsafe for kids to go outdoors. Fast forward to when I became a parent just a couple years after that, and I literally worry about the same thing. The forest fires we saw a couple years ago meant that many places that didn't see this before saw days where there was such smoke in the air that it was dangerous for kids.
I live in a place where that smoke happened. I bought air filters for the family so that we could at least have clean air in the house. Forest fires happen. They happen every single year. It's known as fire season up here. I'd never heard the term fire season outside of just on the periphery. Fire season's a very real thing. Everybody thinks about it up here in the north. And the fact of the matter is, their decision to clear the deadwood, and a lot of what happens, a lot of what happened in BC happens right here in Saskatchewan, where they take all the deadwood and they just leave it piled in the bush. We get thunderstorms, supercells. They come along, lightning starts fires. I actually put out a forest fire 2 years ago. I saved an entire section of a particular spot because we were on time dealing with it. If we hadn't have been, we would have lost so much. It's part of life. One of the people that I live near, they heard the crack of lightning. I heard the same crack. I didn't even know. I just instinctively went outside to see where it came down. Unbeknownst to me, there were 2 other people driving around trying to figure out where that thing struck because everything was dry. They just know it. It's part of the culture. And because they did that, they spotted the heat signature rising up above the trees, and we were able to interdict successfully and save the whole damn thing. Fire season's normal. Liberal forest management policies, that's the problem.
We see extreme weather, forest fires, heat domes, floods.
We've never had thunderstorms before, folks. We've never had hurricanes. Tornadoes, brand new. Only started since we started burning carbon.
Impacting us. We've got to do everything we can to
Thank you,
protect our
Mr.
future.
Singh. That's time. Mr. Poilievre, where does fighting climate change land on your list of priorities when it comes to expanding energy opportunities in this country?
It lands within our priorities of bringing home jobs while bringing down emissions around the world. Look, the reality is that if we push production out of our country to more polluting countries, it actually makes the problem worse. But that has been exactly the Liberal approach with the anti-development law of C-69, blocking of 15 LNG export plants over the last 10 years. We have seen more of those jobs go abroad. I want to bring them home. My plan will be to approve, for example, natural gas liquefaction and export. If we sent our gas to India, for example, to displace half of their demand for electricity, we could reduce emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the total emissions of Canada. That's the way we bring emissions down and jobs up. It's common sense, and now it's time to bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. The next question is for Mr. Carney. How would your government fast-track pipelines and mining projects while also following the Supreme Court decision that requires consent of Indigenous communities?
Well, I think the first thing, and this goes back a bit to where we started, which is recognizing that we are in a crisis. We need to act with maximum force, and having a process and a consultation, but a consultation with a purpose, which is to identify those projects, those investments of national interest that are really going to move the dial in terms of growth, jobs, energy security, while being consistent with long-term competitiveness, which necessarily means lower carbon. And so part of that process is ensuring that First Nations, Indigenous peoples, are there.
Long-term competitiveness has nothing to do with lower carbon. If you do what Carney advocates for in his book, which is re-engineer the entire free market around the carbon con, maybe he's got a point. but it's a government-created market. It doesn't exist without the meddling of centralized governments.
From the start. It also includes their ability to participate fully in those projects, and that's why, and I know I can tell, like, you've got to tell on when I've gone on too long, so I'll finish up, which is,
Note how the moderator never cuts him off. The moderator always lets Carney finish, but Poilievre gets a warning very quickly.
why we're doubling. Our proposal is to double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to $10 billion. What does that actually mean? It means an ability for them to invest equity in those
Mr.
projects
Carney,
and be
that's
full
time.
partners. Thank you.
My tell is my clock, and my clock is at 0, so that's how it goes. Monsieur Blanchet, do you still oppose pipeline construction in Quebec, even though a majority of Quebecers now apparently say they support it?
We will know about that when we have held the debate about that, which has not begun yet. We are just beginning it. First, we are hearing very creative numbers, and we are being fed nonsense. And we will be back to it in a few minutes. But energy, trade, commerce is from south to north or north to south. And it's true in Quebec also. In a little more than 3 years, Donald Trump won't be in office, and there will be not one more pipeline having been built once we get there. So let's be serious, responsible, and we will be back with the numbers. We don't want to pay in Quebec for such monstrosities which will provide us with nothing.
We now move to open debate, and you all will get a chance, or have had a chance, to get the first shot at this. And Monsieur Blanchet, it is your turn to get the first shot. Canada has a substantial supply of critical minerals which are in high demand. Are you in favor of allowing these minerals to be mined?
Of course, it has to be done properly. Quebec has probably the most important clean phosphate reserves in North America. In Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, it is very important. It has to be exploited. This is the best way to use Paul Saguenay as an infrastructure that we need. We have lithium. Everybody needs lithium. Transportation has to be taken from oil to
I like his accent
clean
too,
energy.
by
This
the way.
is what we want to be working on. It is part of the specificities, specifics of Quebec economy. So we are in favor of that, but we don't want to pay for the $30 billion which have been spent on oil and gas by the Liberals last year. It's $7 billion from Quebec. We don't want to pay for the $40 billion which have been spent by the Liberals on Trans Mountain. It's $9 billion from Quebec. Those are $16 billion of which not $1 has been spent in Quebec to develop a lot more power and wealth for Quebecers with our own money.
We need to let the leader of the Liberals respond.
Well, actually, I was going to pick up on the enormous opportunity that exists in Quebec, exists in Ontario, exists in the north of Canada, really exists across this great nation in terms of critical metals and minerals. We are have one of the biggest resources in this country. And this is, it's not just an enormous economic opportunity, it is a strategic opportunity for Canada. So we have to make a decision, not just to develop it, but how do we develop it and who are our partners for it? Do we become more dependent on the United States, which is what they want? By the way, President Trump this week said he might put a tax on critical metals and minerals, just showing again
Yeah, but
the unreliable,
the job is not
if I may, and so the discussions
to
that,
negotiate,
so
not to have
if I may,
tariffs.
if I may
Let's
finish.
let him finish.
Let me finish. So the opportunity includes in Europe and includes in Asia as our partners. Last point. In order to get it done, we'll put in place a first and last mile fund, so these projects are connected to road and rail, so they can go quickly to market, and we will have...
He identified China as our greatest security threat, but they're also our salvation. This is a problem I've been highlighting in my video work with their logic. They embrace China with one hand, and then they selectively cast them aside with the other hand. The Americans are not the bad guys. They're our natural partners. If they're willing to buy, we should be willing to sell. Blanchett was trying to say he should be negotiating. Blanchett is correct.
All of the other fast-tracking measures in place that I talked about earlier in terms of capital, timing, approvals, so that we can move quickly, we can be stronger at home,
Always with the
Mr. Singh,
approval of
Yeah,
the
I
Mr.
think-
Singh has the
Sure
floor.
about that.
We should absolutely take advantage of the fact that we've got incredible amounts of critical minerals in our country. And the way we do that is
For real? You
any
can't hear
energy
me?
project or any project of this nature, make sure it's got the local community buy-in. It creates good jobs in communities. Make sure we are meeting all our environmental needs, and we work with Indigenous partnership. And so I absolutely agree with that. I want to build on something Mr. Blanchet mentioned about the investments that
Okay,
this country
Troy.
has made. What
Very
I
cool.
found very troubling is that the past number of years, the Liberal government record is one where we have spent the most subsidies compared to any other country in the G7 on subsidizing oil and gas. These are highly profitable companies.
You
I
voted
think that's
for
the
it.
wrong thing to do. We fought against it again and again.
No, you voted
And then
for
the
it.
Liberals have continued
Over
to
and
do it.
again.
And so my question really to Mr. Carney is, will you commit to ending oil and gas subsidies? We should be using that to invest in people, not giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies.
Yeah.
Blanchett's right. The NDP, every single opportunity they had to do anything, all they did was rubber stamp liberal policy. That's why their party is dying.
We talked.
I promised Mr. Polyev the next, we'll come back and get that question answered. Mr. Polyev.
Well, Mr. Carney, you point out that Donald Trump has a wrong-headed idea of putting a tax on our mines and our industry. And that is wrong. But so do you. You want to apply a massive industrial carbon tax on Canadian mines, Canadian steel mills, Canadian aluminum plants,
You want to let them split as
Canadian
much as they
oil
want?
and gas. And
Shut
your
up,
idea
Singh.
is to double the tax that Trump is applying by hitting them a second time. This will do nothing for the environment. It will actually ship our jobs south of the border,
Mr. Collier's
just
plan is let them
like
pollute as much as they
President
want.
Trump
Not a good
wants. My plan.
He has no
brings
class.
Production home here to Canada. For example, I will give a tax credit to low-emitting Canadian industry like Quebec's aluminum, for example, or British Columbia's natural gas, so that we not only bring home the production, but we do it below global average levels of emissions,
you
so
translate
that we
that?
actually help the environment while bringing
wants to
home
let
the
big
jobs
polluters
for our
pollute as
people
much as they want.
We have to let him
at the
finish.
same time. That is a sensible, pragmatic approach that
Disgusting.
puts us in charge of our economic destiny so we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change.
You know that Kay and Peele skit where they got angry Obama? That's what I feel like I should be. I should be angry Polyev. Well, because I understand completely watching this why he's doing what he's doing. Because people don't want to see him. The voters that he's aiming for don't want to see a loss of decorum. They're looking at Singh and they don't like what they see. And I think Polyev knows that. But this sucks because every time he's got something valid to say, the carbon tax ain't going away. There's going to be a big industrial carbon tax. That's the way this is going to go. He wrote a book, as I've said. The carbon tax ain't gone. He suspended it for the purposes of the election, but it's going to come back. The Americans aren't going to have one. And again, the giant sucking sound of all your money being taken out of the country. Polyev's right. And whenever Polyev is right, Singh steps in to talk over him. There is a coordinated plan to stop this man from winning the election. Period.
Mr.
want to let
Carney,
them
we've
pollute
got,
as
hang
much
on a
as they
second.
want.
I want to get Mr.
Watch him
want to
let
give you a
Carney
chance to
talk.
Speak to Mr. Singh's criticism about oil and gas subsidies and Mr. Polyev's criticism about the industrial carbon
Watch.
tax.
Okay, I'm going to make 3 points. I'll make 4 if you want me to respond to that, but I want to make 3. The first is that I answered this question last night, but I think the puck had already dropped in the Canadians game, so not everyone heard it. Yes, end oil and gas subsidies. That's
That's why you need New Democrats. We'll make it
Secondly, I would have done it independently. Secondly, recognizing that the biggest component of that was the cost of building Keystone. Keystone, which is the pipeline which has helped to increase oil and gas oil exports rather by 50% in this country. That is an asset of the people of Canada. We own it. And the question of what to do it. So it's not a subsidy that has disappeared, it's actually an asset of Canada. The third point, though, in terms of where the oil and gas industry, particularly the oil industry, wants to and needs to go, which is to become low carbon in the production and transportation of oil. One of the big projects we
He's
need
in
to move
school.
forward
He's
with
got to put his hand
is
up.
carbon capture and storage, the Pathways project.
joke.
So that we have oil and gas that is competitive, not just today, 10 years from now and 20 years from now, as the world uses less.
10 years and 20 years from now, we have to have competitive oil and gas, but we got C-69, which is going to prevent pipelines from being built. You wrote a book about how you're going to keep it in the ground. Oh, and by the way, net zero, 2030, Agenda 2030. It's all still on the table, Carney. He's lying. He's just lying. Lie. You can't believe a thing that comes out of his mouth. Maybe you can believe his book. I don't even know if you can believe that.
Yes, we want to have more market share. We need to do
Mr. Carney, I agree
that.
with
My government,
How do you get more market share if you don't increase production? Who are you competing with? We produce a lot of heavy crude. We don't produce a lot of light.
government will move that.
But by definition, a subsidy isn't when we buy a pipeline. I'm talking about subsidies that go to oil and gas companies.
Well,
independent, separate from the country, oil and gas companies. That's what I'm
the
talking
figure you
about.
quoted last night included the cost of the pipeline.
Do you want to
There's
address
billions
his
of dollars
point?
we're spending. We got to stop spending.
Sorry, can we get you to address his point about the industrial carbon tax?
How much will the industrial carbon tax add to the price of a car?
So the first thing I want to say is I'm going to address the broader point. The broader point is the entire absence of a climate plan from Mr. Poilievre, which, by the way, is going to put our industry and our country at a disadvantage as we're looking for new trading partners. Guess what? Most people want to deepen our partnership in Europe, in Asia. Those countries care about whether or not you've made progress. Second thing is, we're designing a program so that the big polluters pay Canadians at home for making responsible climate choices, for retrofitting their home, getting their emissions down, or improving otherwise. And that is smart climate policy. It's better for the big polluters, and it's better for Canadians.
Chair Paul.
Does anybody else just tune out whenever they talk this climate nonsense? I got this feeling, which I've had for over a decade, that eventually all of this is just going to go away. All of this talk about carbon will eventually just evaporate because the world can't fixate on this in the way that they want to. They want to make it a crisis that is happening right now, today, in front of your face. It's just not. The sea levels aren't rising. You can look at the satellite imagery. You can look at the maps. You can look at pictures that were taken 80 years ago, and everything's exactly where it was at the time. And meanwhile, Brookfield, G-Fans, the pension funds that Carney wants to raid, they're all investing in beachfront property along the ocean. Why do you think they're doing that? I think they all know it's a con, but it's a hell of an industry. Billions and billions and billions of dollars are tied up in this myth, and it's an easy one because every time taxpayers, as they call them, with their families look out a window and see a thunderstorm, they think the world is ending. It's a really good game.
Mr. Carney didn't answer my question. I asked how much would an industrial carbon tax on Canadian steel add to the price of a car? He won't answer because he knows that it will be very expensive because there's lots of steel in cars. Now, Mr. Carney has temporarily
But do you know the answer?
hidden the
You don't know
carbon
the answer
tax.
either. You're just
It's
throwing out random
thousands of
Just
dollars
making it up, though. You don't
extra
know.
cost.
Actually, I do know the answer to that question. He's wrong.
When you add
Let him
taxes to
talk.
steel, you raise the
Where's
price
the
of
moderator?
everything that uses steel. When you
My
add
God.
everything,
It's a
taxes
straw man
to
argument to say,
to
do you know
the
the price?
when
You
you
don't know the
add
price.
when
You
you
don't know the
add
answer.
when
here
you
to
add
learn. He's here to
the
learn.
carbon tax onto the price of, for example, fertilizer, you increase the price of food. So while Mr. Carney has temporarily hidden the Liberal carbon tax at the pumps while keeping the tax fully in law and planning to raise it after the election, he's also going after a tax on our industry that will ultimately be passed on to you. After a lost Liberal decade of rising costs, we cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a new government that will fully axe the carbon tax, increase the jobs that we have here in Canada, and bring down your cost of living.
We've got just a little over 3 minutes left in this segment. So, Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, do you think climate change is still a priority from Canadians? You're out there. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. You speak to any young person and they think, we're seeing climate crisis in front of us happening right now. You speak to
There's
seniors
weather
who say,
today.
we used to be able to live in our homes without air conditioning. and
Maybe I
now
should start talking
we're
over
seeing
him.
heat crises in communities that never had worries about extreme weather. We're seeing flooding. We're seeing forest fires like never before. We are living in a
Never
climate
before.
crisis. So Canadians are absolutely worried
Breathless
about it. As soon as we
fear.
come into a summer, we start seeing those forest fires again. It's top of mind for Canadians because they're living it, they're seeing it. And I want those Canadians to know, Mr. Carney is not going to end those fossil fuel subsidies unless I'm there to fight back. Mr. Poilievre wants to let big polluters pollute as much as they want, poison our beautiful land, our water,
That's not true.
and air.
poison our beautiful land with carbon dioxide, poison our forests with carbon dioxide. You unmitigated moron. The fact that Canadians are looking out their windows and they're seeing things happening that have always happened, and it's linked in their mind to climate change, is the result of propaganda. It's not the result of any particular newness. We are in an interglacial warm period. The world has been warming up for 10,000 years, and thank God it has been, because where I'm sitting, there should be 1.5 miles of ice above my head. But instead, there's a verdant forest, and it's beautiful.
Wants to let them dump into our oceans. I'm going to fight back and defend our.
Dumping carbon into the oceans? Is it like liquid pollution carbon? Like, what kind of carbon is this? Are there many different types of carbon? Is there radioactive carbon? Is there hydrochloric acid carbon? Are there chemicals that will burn your face off or burn out your ability to smell that are made entirely of carbon? Because I think that's what we're talking about. This was my problem when I ran in 2019. I went to these environmental debates and I'm just like, here's a whole slew of problems that we're not dealing with because carbon dioxide sucks all the oxygen out of the air, and that's all we want to talk about. That debate, that environmental debate, that David Suzuki Foundation debate, I'm not one to give myself a pat on the back very often. I'm very hypercritical of myself. But I did a really good job pegging that down and also predicting what would happen with the entire pledge that they all signed in 2019. What happened is nothing, because the realities of the world get in the way of the carbon con. Everything produces CO2. It's a building block of life. Too much of it in the atmosphere might be a concern. We get up to 1,000 parts per million, people are going to start having headaches. So there's an element of truth to it, but the idea that there's a crisis or that it's somehow driving the weather and changing things irrevocably is a total fabrication and myth. And that's just what it is.
Monsieur Blanchet, on the issue of whether or not people still care about climate change.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change, because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large-scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist. If Alberta wanted to exploit oil and gas and it were not a matter of pollution, I wouldn't mind at all. That's their business. Our own powerhouse in terms of energy in Quebec is clean energy. We are the best place in the world to achieve that. Our market is the northeastern part, Democrat part of United States. We want to keep our money to create wealth in Quebec for Quebecers. Let us be different because we can afford to be different.
Let me give, I will get to you because I said I would. But you've taken a couple of hits here, and I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things that people on this side of the stage have said.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we do support protecting the environment. We want to ban the dumping of raw sewage into our waters. We want to hold large corporations to high environmental standards to protect our water and air. But we cannot do that by raising taxes and sending jobs overseas, as Mr. Carney is proposing to do. That has been the approach of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. What the biggest companies that develop our resources say is that we need to repeal the Liberal anti-development law C-69, a law Mr. Carney wants to keep in place. They say we need to repeal the industrial carbon tax and get rid of the Liberal energy cap. We need 6 months approval in order to take back energy security and energy sovereignty.
We can summarize that.
Mr. Carney, hang on. Last word to Mr. Carney in this segment, please.
Thank you very much. You know, I was born in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, just north of what the oil sands became. When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale, quote unquote. But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution
if I may.
The worst pollution.
May I finish? May I?
It's actually one of the largest environmental cleanups, if you want to look at it another way.
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let him finish his point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver it.
And that is time for this segment. Gentlemen, let us go to our final theme, which is called Leading in a Crisis.
Canadians know how to weather a storm. Canadians know how to get through a difficult time.
If, at the end of the day, we end up with the balance of power, Quebec is safer than it could be in any other scenario.
Now is not a time for weakness. Now is the time to take back control.
Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. Does Mark Carney strike you as somebody who's ever been in a physical altercation? You know, I honestly think that it would do everybody good if they got punched in the head a couple times in their life as an educational experience. I've taken a few, and I don't really like the experience. It's not much fun for me. You may notice that I got a little bump in my nose. It's been broken before. I love these tough guys. It's not that he's short. I mean, that's part of the problem. It's that they talk tough and they use these platitudes, but none of them have ever absorbed a punch to the head. That's a life skill. Everybody should feel that at least once.
Okay, leading in a crisis is a pretty broad theme that allows us to explore many different avenues here. So let's get to it. Mr. Carney, you get the first question this time. We haven't balanced a budget in this country in 17 years, and 10 of those years were under your party. You have pledged to get us to a balanced budget in 3 years.
Couldn't even score on an empty net, Mr. Net Zero. It's quippy. That one got me.
Question is, how?
So let me put this in the context of leading in a crisis, which is, in a crisis, you got to plan for the worst. Worst is that the U.S. actually does want to take us over. Secondly, you got to have a plan to build, and that'll include a fiscal plan, and I will get to that in a second. The third thing is you need to respond in a crisis with overwhelming force. You need to think big.
Where are we getting the overwhelming force from? This is Canada. Our force readiness for our already small army is below 50%. Can we even field a battle-ready battalion? And how long would that battalion be able to be fielded for? Overwhelming force.
You need to move rapidly. The things we've been discussing today are a subset of what we can and should do as a nation, and we can deliver. And government can play a role, but its role has to be catalytic. And so our approach is that we will slow the rate of spending. It's been growing at 9% a year, operational spending, program spending, away from transfers, individual, 9% a year. We'll slow that to 2%. We will focus on a small amount of capital spending by the federal government in order to drive enormous private investment up to $500 billion by 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ukraine surely constitutes a crisis.
Oh, man, here we go.
Leading in a time of crisis.
Here we go.
Mr. Poilievre, question for you. If the United States withholds support from Ukraine going forward, do you believe Canada should commit more to assist?
I believe we should continue to support Ukraine. Our party supported donating missiles that the Canadian military was decommissioning. We supported funds and other armaments to back the Ukrainians in the defense of their sovereignty.
Let me tell you about Ukraine and why the CPC is doing this, in spite of the fact that the war either ends or we all die. There's a huge Ukrainian diaspora here in Canada, something like 1.1 million of them. They have a very strong culture, probably a stronger cultural backbone than what we think of as Canada. They're allowed to have monuments dedicated to people like Stephen Bandera, an actual Nazi collaborator who participated in the killing not just of Jews but Poles in Western Ukraine. Those monuments are still standing here in Canada today. That's reality. But they vote in large numbers. They have a lot of clout. Chrystia Freeland was raised by them. That's why they do it. This is one of my biggest problems with the Conservative Party of Canada, the support for the war in Ukraine. And if they did form a government, I hope they change their tune, because we should be trying to end the war. I don't know how it's lost on people. 1 million young men in the flower of their youth and in their prime have died in a war that was completely and totally avoidable. None of the people on the stage will tell you that part of the story. The peace deals that have been torpedoed, the unnecessity of the start of the war in the first place. I got a kid, and I'm alive. The idea, I don't even think people can grasp how big 1 million is. It's huge. The untold suffering, all of it unnecessary. It's just disgusting to me.
We also
There's
need
nothing
to
about
rebuild
this out
our
of the
own
CPC that
Canadian
I like.
military, because the Russians want to make incursions into our waters. We'll be buying 4 massive Arctic icebreakers. I'll be opening the first Arctic base since the Cold War in Canada, CFB Iqaluit. We're going to double the size of the Arctic Rangers and fill the vacancies in our Canadian armed forces. We need a change to rebuild our military, which has been so disintegrated under the cuts and the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But we can have a change because we have the best soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the world, and they will have full backing from my government if you give me the honor of becoming Prime Minister.
I may come back to that one in the open forum because I'm not sure we got an answer about Ukraine on that one, but okay.
Well,
going on. Monsieur Blanchet.
The answer was yes.
We'll get more details, perhaps, as we go forward. Monsieur Blanchet, given the U.S. trade war, should any talk of a referendum on Quebec independence be put on pause?
That one is easy. It will happen only after the negotiation is over, and that's a good thing. I want to say I support the idea. We must help Ukraine, but we also must help the civilians of Gaza, and we must destroy Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. You know what? I don't want to be the leader of Canada. You will understand that. I don't want to be Prime Minister. But I can offer to be a partner, a responsible partner, a collaborative partner. If Quebec is respected in its differences, in its aluminum industry and lumberwood industry and culture and French language and values of secularity of the state, which is the price
Moderator
to be paid in
definitely
order
showing
to have
his
real
bias
equality.
on that.
Then, if we are respected, we will be a partner, and then even Canada will be stronger in its negotiation against Donald Trump. This is what I am offering. Respect us.
Mr. Singh, I watched last night's debate. You seemed very eager to talk about healthcare, so let's talk a little more healthcare right now. You have made many promises on healthcare. If a province says to you, we'll take your money for healthcare, but not your conditions on how to spend it, what do you do?
We've got to negotiate. We can't be giving away money without clear conditions. We're in a healthcare crisis right now, and a crisis that is hurting people across this country. People are waiting desperately in line in emergency rooms for hours and hours. Seniors are waiting for years and years to get the care that they need for surgeries that would remove pain or help them deal with mobility issues. We're in a serious crisis. Healthcare workers are burnt out. They are overstretched. And what we're seeing is more and more privatization, and that is hurting our public universal healthcare system. So
It's 7 o'clock here. I'm going to go and read my children books. That's what I'm going to do, rather than finish watching this. I'm already 2 hours into this thing, but I will finish on this. Privatization is not the big bully that Jagmeet Singh wants you to think it is. Other nations in the OECD deliver healthcare universally, and they do it with a private component in their healthcare systems, because privatization or private component leads to competition, which leads to better outcomes. We are dead last in healthcare delivery because we have more in common with North Korea than we do many of the European systems. 60,000 Canadians leave Canada every single year to seek care just in the United States. Those are tax dollars we're missing out on collecting because these guys like taxes. So let's just speak in terms of taxation. They could be paying for those services here. We could be making money off it, and we could save them a whole pile of rigmarole and problems. Oftentimes, they go to the United States, they get the diagnosis that they can't get here. And then they come back, and they got to fight the Canadian healthcare system to get the diagnostic recognized because they're more afraid of competition than they are concerned with delivering actual healthcare to the people who are supposed to be the client, the Canadian taxpayer. It's disgusting. People have to pay taxes, pay into a healthcare system, and then leave the country anyway to spend after-tax dollars to save their own lives or get diagnoses. Canada should not be afraid of private delivery. You can still have universal coverage if that's what you want and have private components. I don't know why any politician doesn't bring that up. I don't know why it's not discussed. I don't know why other nations and how they deliver healthcare is ever a subject that these guys want to get into. But they clearly don't. I'll be back tomorrow with another bit. We'll discuss the rest of this if we even have to, because honestly, on foreign policy, this is where all four parties, in my mind, fail miserably. But like I've said about the Conservative Party before, on a point-by-point basis, I find worth in what they would deliver, and I hate the fact that I'm being corralled into an inevitable Mark Carney victory by every single facet of the system, whether it's the fringe part of the system, the media, the politics. They all want Carney and they want Poilievre to lose, and I like my monkey wrenches, and I'd like to huck a great big one into their plans. At any rate, I'm Frank Vaughan. I'm going to go and